Right now it's sleeting, freezing rain. Tomorrow it's supposed to be 80 degrees and windy. I think Mother Nature's confused.
Hey there, thanks for turning down my road. If this is your first time here, my name's Carl. My little brother and I both work for local farmers full time, but we both also farm together with our cattle herd and our hay operation. If you don't have the joy of farming yourself, I'd love to help you experience it through this channel. Whatever your background, you found the right place. This is Dodge Brothers Farm and Ranch.
Hey, how are you doing? I'm glad you dropped by. I've got some stuff to show you here. It's finally not blowing wind outside, so I can actually walk around the planter here for a second and show you some of the stuff that we put on it when we had it in the shop in town this winter. Let's take a look. So probably the biggest and most noticeable visual difference are these big yellow saddle tanks that we have on the sides of the tractor. They're full of 32% UAN, which is a nitrogen fertilizer right now, and we're putting that right next to the furrow with a system on the planter called Conceal that I'll show you in just a second. But first I want to show you how these tanks hang on the tractor. This is kind of a brilliant design that helps to distribute the weight across the tractor so it's not as hard on everything. They bolt this hub extension on past the outside dual, and this is very similar to what you would do if you were going to put another wheel on it. But they bolt this hub extension on there, and then this cap on the end of the hub extension has a bearing in it that this shaft sits in. So your wheel's turning all the time, but the shaft is sitting still, and that is supporting the weight of the back end of the tank. And then on the front end of the tank, there are these brackets that bolt right to the side of the transmission housing on the tractor, and then these big hanger brackets that come off of those and support the weight of the front of the tanks. Now right here we've got all of our plumbing. You can see right here is the pump that's driven hydraulically. You can see those two hydraulic hoses going into the pump motor. We've got two valves for shutting off the flow to the left side of the planter or the right side of the planter. On the top, there's a flow meter that can control the amount of liquid flowing at any given time to match up with your ground speed so that you're always applying the rate that you want to be applying. Here's a pressure gauge that I can actually see from up in the tractor to make sure that my pressure is what I want it to be. And then right here is a filter to filter out any contaminants before it gets into the pump. We've got a total capacity of 1,000 gallons on the tractor, 500 gallons in each tank. Both tanks are plumbed together underneath the tractor so that the fluid level equalizes in both tanks. You got to be careful if you're sitting on a side hill and they're full, it'll actually flow liquid over into this tank and overflow it. Right here on the front of the tractor, we've got the fill port, and then that hose runs underneath all the way back to where it joins up to the two hoses that go out to the tanks. Now the fertilizer is pumped out underneath the hitch of the tractor and into these hoses, one going down the right side of the planter, one going down the left side. And then if you follow this line back here, it joins up to this hard plastic line that goes the entire length of the planter. And then of course there's a rubber hose that connects the hard plastic line here at the pivot point where the planter folds. But let me show you how the nitrogen fertilizer is actually injected into the ground. So this system is called Conceal. It is designed by Precision Planting. This is a split gauge wheel, and then you have your knife right here. So you're actually knifing the nitrogen in right next to the furrow. The disc openers right here are creating the furrow to drop the seed into, and then right next to that furrow, like an inch or so away, is where this knife is running in the ground and knifing in the nitrogen. It's all plumbed up just like a sprayer here with these T-jet fittings, and there's a plunger in here with a little rubber diaphragm. It's spring loaded, so when you turn on the flow and build up enough pressure, it pushes that diaphragm out and overcomes the spring pressure. But then when you shut it off, that pops back in and then creates vacuum to keep the fluid from leaking and dribbling out the bottom of the knife all the time when you're driving around, turning around on the end rows or driving down the road. Another thing we did was we repaired the closing wheel frames. Right here, these bushings were worn out really bad, and then the frame was actually worn out where the bushing sits. So this little collar right here that's welded on and the bearing inside of it is an aftermarket kit, and it's way better than the original John Deere bushings. You can see there's no side slop in it at all, left to right. It's nice and tight. And then those bearings are going to make it last a long time, as opposed to the bushings that are constantly rubbing the hole in the casting and making the hole bigger. So we're really happy with that repair kit. Another repair we had to do was we had to replace these upper arms and the lower arms. These are called the parallel arms. They attach the whole row unit to the frame of the planter, and on the ends of them there's a bushing that sits inside here that protects the bolt, and it's supposed to protect the arms from wearing out. But what in fact happened on the John Deere arms was the arms were actually more worn out than the bushings were. So just putting a new bushing in that hole didn't tighten it up at all. So we had to replace the arms on the top and the bottom, and we put all new bushings on. Now it's really important to have those bushings and your connections be in good shape, because if there's looseness in those connections, as your row unit is riding across the field, it wants to rock forward and backwards and pitch forwards and backwards, and somewhat rocks to the side a little bit as well. And all of that rocking and jumping around creates a lot of vibration. And your meter right here that's in charge of metering the seeds out wants to have a nice smooth ride quality, because if you're jarring it around, it makes it really hard for it to do a great job of metering the seeds properly. We also added these new closing wheels. The John Deere closing wheels, if you remember what they looked like before, they were just a solid rubber wheel. They did not have these spikes or rubber fingers on them. These closing wheels are called the Poly Twister wheels. They're made by a company called Yetter. They're designed to kind of break up the sidewall of your furrow. If you ever had conditions where the furrow was a little bit too wet, and the disc opener up here when it's making the furrow can actually smear the sidewall of the furrow so that it doesn't want to close nicely around the seed and it might want to open back up. These are designed to kind of puncture that sidewall compaction and break up your furrow so that you get a nice uniform closing. Okay, here's something I'm pretty excited about trying. This, as you can see, is a different style closing system than what we have on the rest of the planter. These two rows are outfitted with Precision Planting's Furrow Force, and this is a totally different style of closing system. The first stage of closing is done by these discs, and the way that they're shaped with these teeth on them, it also breaks up any sidewall compaction that you might have in the furrow, and then pushes the furrow closed from both sides underneath. And then the second stage of closing is done by these two rubber wheels on the back. You can see they're kind of soft, and you put enough pressure on those to push down and make sure you don't have any air pockets in there. And depending on the moisture and the soil structure, you're going to run a different amount of downforce on here. And that is controlled by this airbag right here. And that's plumbed into one of the controls in the cab that I'll show you in a little while. Okay, last but definitely not least are these two highly experimental row cleaners. Check this out. What we are trying out this year is 2 rows of a brand new row cleaner system from Precision Planting called Reveal. Now you'll notice that the Martin row cleaners with the clean sweep cylinders attached to them are hung back on the front of the row units. So they're riding along just ahead of the gauge wheels on the row units. But this Reveal system is actually not attached to the row unit at all. It is hung from the main frame of the planter. So I think part of the idea of that is that any vibration from the row cleaners bouncing over stones and through dips and over clods and stuff, that vibration is not transferred back to the row unit. Another thing that makes these operate a little differently, they do have an airbag, so you're controlling down pressure and lift from the cab, but you also have this semi-pneumatic rubber gauge wheel that runs right behind them. So you can set the maximum depth of this row cleaner system by where you have this wheel set. Now your depth on these Martin row cleaners is set by this treader wheel, and that depth is always the same. You just kind of control it by how much downforce you put on it. You actually can bury these treader wheels under the ground and start pushing dirt with the inside of the treader wheel. The other thing I think I'm going to like about them, if you ever get into a situation where you hit a mound of dirt with the front of the row cleaner, these row cleaners tend to want to drop down under the dirt, and then the dirt pours over the top of them. Whereas I've noticed that the way these row cleaners are hung, if you run into an obstacle, it naturally wants to push them back and up, and it rides over that obstacle. So I'll be interested to see how these hold up and what we think of the job that it does. It's something that you can't buy right now. This is just in the beta testing stage. They've got it out on a few planters right now, and they're wanting to find out how they're going to hold up and how they're going to work and how guys will like them. So I am very excited that we're able to try these out on our planter. Okay, let's get out and see what kind of a job we're doing. I can't stress enough how important it is to get out once in a while and make sure, check those seeds in the ground, make sure you're doing it right. Okay, I want to check seed on one of the rows that has the poly twisters and one of the rows that has the furrow force. The first law of digging for seed is that if someone is watching you, you can never find the seed. So, whoop. I got him, but I might have moved it. That one there is pretty deep. If that's what we're actually doing, I better shallow it up just a little bit. So I better find another one. So could you just look away for a second so I can find a seed? I'll tell you when whoop, there he is. But once again, I think I messed it up. I like to sneak up on the seeds from behind so I can catch them in the profile and figure out how deep they were planted and if there's any air pockets around them or dry dirt. That guy was right there. I didn't mess him up. So that is right where I want to be. I'm shooting for 2.5 right now. Let's see if we can find one in the furrow force. So I find the easiest way is to just go crazy and try to find the first seed. And once you find one, then you sort of know how they're spaced out. Hello, Mr. Worm. So there's one right there. Since I got one right here, I should have another one right about here. So that's exactly what I want to see. If you look right there, all the soil right around the seed is clean. It's not laying on old corn stalks or rocks or anything. And it's tucked nicely into moisture. There's not a bunch of dry dirt. Sometimes if you're not doing a good job of closing the furrow, you'll end up with you'll still be able to see the V shape right here like this. And then this whole area in here would be full of dry dirt. You know, you can tell because it's a lot lighter colored. But we're doing a really good job here. I'm very happy with how we're doing. So I'm gonna plant some more and see how it goes. So most of the road edges right along the field are not perfectly straight. And so you can't just set a straight GPS line. You have to actually drive by hand until you do this boundary mapping. If you look on the screen here, that purple line is exactly where I drove the left front tire of the Gator in March of last year. And I am not steering, the tractor's doing the steering. And look at where it's putting that last row of corn. Right exactly where you want it. Is that cool or what? Now it's especially helpful when you're starting a field from scratch in the middle of the night and it's dark and it's really dusty and you can't see anything. Especially when you're trying to look past these tanks, it really makes it hard. And to look through all the technology and the tanks, you can't see anything. So here's a little clip from Instagram of starting a field in the dark the other night. Check this out. I mean, look at this. Now that I'm headed the other direction, the way the dust is, I cannot see the end of the planter. Not a chance. And like I say, I can't see through the saddle tanks to see the fence. Man, guys, it is such a different day than it was yesterday. I mean, we had sleet yesterday afternoon. It was freezing cold outside, and now it is 83 degrees outside, and the wind is blowing. It is dry and hot. Feels like Texas. So I know this video is getting a little long. I had hoped that I would have time to explain all of this stuff because some of you guys have already asked me, why do I have 2 clean sweep controllers? Why do I have so much stuff mounted in the cab? You can't even see out the window. I'm gonna have to put that off till next time. I wanna spend a little time on each item and explain why it needs to be in here. And I don't wanna just rush through it. And I don't want this video to be 35 minutes long. You don't want that either. I should have another video coming out in just a few days. Obviously, there's a lot of content this time of year. There's just not a lot of time to get the editing done. I know you'll forgive me for that. You guys are always very gracious in the comment section. I appreciate that. I want to try to get these out as rapidly as I can so that you can start asking questions and I can start answering them and showing you the answers in video form before planting season is over, which, if this weather holds, actually probably won't be very long. So make sure you tune in next time to learn about what all is going on in this massive wall of technology to my right in the tractor cab. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for riding along. I'll see you next time.